Hey, Dave Melenda here, Positive Polarity Podcast. Hope things are going awesome for you. I have to tell you right up front that this is a topic today that is way outside my comfort zone. So I share that with you for two reasons. Number one, to pique your interest, but also number two, to kind of warn you that it's a tough subject. And we're going to do our best to unpack this. So I have the honor of hanging out with Kevin Ringstaff. How are you, sir?
I am great, Dave. It's my absolute pleasure to be on. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And you actually, I didn't want to tell the company name because it's going to give away our topic, but you're actually the founder of a company called Grieving at Work. So tell us a little bit about that and what's going on over there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started this company, Grieving at Work, because my very first company that I've ever done was PetCloud, where I do grief support for pet loss,
Okay.
and I was marketing that as an employee benefit. So
Oh,
something that a employer would give to all of their employees.
okay.
And while I was doing that, I was having so many different conversations about grief. And I found out that, well, there's no support for grief in the workplace.
Sure.
Like we don't know how to talk about it
Right.
or support other employees when they're going through it. And so I saw a gigantic opportunity to help out a lot of people.
Awesome. And so yeah, I got to be again. I'm going to be as open and honest as I can.
Mhm.
It wasn't a topic that when I first got approached by you, I'm like, oh man, how do I fit this in? I'm a positive. This is Positive Polarity Podcast, right? I want to be positive, Kevin. The reality is that this goes on every day, and so I don't want to be the kind of person that hides my head in the sand, pretends that grief isn't there. Especially, I
Mhm.
like how you kind of talk about grief as being the ultimate disruptor in a business. So
Mhm.
when that happens, fill us in on like what does that look like in a business? What have you seen, that do to businesses and that do to people? What are some things you can help
Yeah.
us with there?
So like when we have a loss, right? And we have something that's very traumatic. Most employers in the US have bereavement leave. But when you come back from bereavement leave and you're back into work on, that first day, you're not at 100%.
Right.
You're maybe 60% of whatever it was that you were putting out before.
Sure.
Because the number one thing about grief is just about everyone reports feelings of lack of concentration. You can't focus, too much anxiety, depression, you can't sleep.
Sure.
And all of that affects our ability to work.
Sure.
And not only that, but when a grieving employee comes in, he or she can affect everyone around them too. And go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
And that we can affect everyone around us,
Yeah.
and just learning how to talk about grief in general, and learn that, just embrace the fact that it's going to be awkward, right? It's going to be awkward. There's
Sure.
nothing
Yep.
we can do about it.
Right, right. Well, and so as a leader, if I'm part of a company and I'm involved in leadership where people report to me, I'm responsible for them, whatever the words are in your world, I can see how easy it would be to kind of just gloss over this. If somebody on my team, lost a pet, to your point of your other company, or lost a family member, or is dealing with grief of whatever magnitude, whatever is in their life. I have to say, I'm not prior to this discussion, which I'm honored that you're hanging out with us. Nobody has shared with me, okay, how do you deal with this? you
Mhm.
know you tell people it's okay, it's going to get better. I mean, there's all these things we know not to do, right? But I
Mhm.
don't know if I've ever been instructed what to do. So I
Yeah.
guess that's kind of where I want to start in this, Kevin, is, if let's just say for the sake of the conversation, that I lost something of value in my life, whatever, there was trauma, whatever was going on, you
Mhm.
know what, and you know what, let's do it this way. I'll make myself I've never told people this before, but I'm going to share it now, is that when I was young, I was in my early 20s, and we actually had a baby that we lost in delivery. So we lost a baby, and for a long time, in my early 20s. I don't know how to deal with that. I I struggled through that. So let's just say, because and that did happen to me. And so let's just, walk me through, if you were the leader of my company and I had this grief that I'm in the process of going through. Walk me through, what would we be doing? What would we be talking about, so that we can kind of, help our listeners with this?
Yeah. Well, first, I'm sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
I know something like that sticks with us our entire lives.
Right. Yep.
And well, that's the very first thing I would say as a manager. That exact same thing. I'm so sorry for what you're going through. And during that first meeting, I guess when you're back to work, like when you're back from bereavement leave and you're trying to get back into it, the main thing I like to ask that managers do is to exercise patience.
Okay.
Right? Things are going to take longer to do than normal. We're going to forget things. We might make small mistakes.
Sure.
And if, as a manager, if that employee is working on, say, critical systems, things where like attention to detail is paramount, right? We have to like think about that and plan for that. Like, for instance, if you were an air traffic controller and you came back in on day one, do you feel like you'd be able to do that job exactly the way you used to be?
Sure. Not at all. Absolutely. Yep. So
Well,
you exercise your patience, and the question that I have, just out of curiosity, is, would you then, if I was comfortable with the rest of my company knowing, or the rest of the people on my team, but I didn't feel comfortable sharing it myself, do you then, do you encourage leaders to kind of rally the troops around, so that there's a multitude of people that are helping me out through
well,
this?
absolutely, yeah. That's one of the things I talk about is the dissemination of information.
Okay.
Because there are people around you who, your coworkers who do care, and when you have a colleague that's out, you do want to know. And I do encourage management to let everyone know about it, because when that individual comes back that first day, you don't want 50 people coming by and saying the same thing over and over and over again.
Right.
So we just say it in one sitting and let everyone know. And at the same time, we can do things like, here's the funeral, here's when it's going to be, here's if you want to send a gift to the family, if you want to call and send presents or condolences, this is what you can do.
Okay. So you're trying to help moderate then, because I'm struggling. I'm dealing with so much other stuff. And I remember hearing, somebody talk about your energy that you have, and whether it's, you put some towards physical, psychological, emotional, you put towards all these on a day-to-day basis. And in a normal situation, it might be an equal pie. But in this situation, in a grief, you're focusing so much on just, your emotional state, that maybe your physical state goes by the wayside, maybe some of your communication skills. I love the fact that you're saying exercise patience. I think as a group, though, we really are, filling in for the weakness, or the missing part of that other person. Is that kind of what your thought is there in that, Kevin?
In a way, it's not like the other person's incapable.
Hmm.
It's just we're there in case,
Okay.
should they need it. There are
That's,
some people who like find great escape by going to work,
yep.
because you're not thinking about your grief when you're just busy, busy, busy. And that's what they love. That's what they crave. And
Right.
for those people, taking responsibility away would be a bad thing.
Gotcha. So do
As
you,
a manager, you just talk about it with them,
okay.
just very bluntly, very matter of fact.
Okay. So then, do you kind of would you be asking me, do you want me to help relieve some of the stress that you have by taking some of your workload away? Or are you the type of person that gets buried in work? Are you getting into that minutia with people, Kevin, to try and help them understand where, what the parameters are? Because I'd really be curious to understand that.
Yeah, and I do that in my coaching sessions, and it's very different based on industry.
Okay.
Like the insurance industry is different from healthcare, which is different from software.
Okay.
And
Yeah, go ahead.
oh, and now and like I and everyone grieves differently. Two people can have the same loss. Another person could have the exact same loss you did, right?
Yes. Right.
But react entirely different and heal entirely different.
So
And part of this
are you
is I've
explaining
learned
that then to the group then, that the people are going to, even
yeah.
people trying to grieve, like for my coworkers, let's say,
Mhm,
they are going to they're going to react differently, right? Some people
mhm,
are going to, not know what to do, so they kind of avoid me. you
mhm,
know Other people are going to try and want to fix something, you
mhm.
know and I
Exactly.
might just want someone to sit next to me and not say anything. I mean, my wall was up because of the circumstances that I was in. I was so petrified of other people,
Yeah.
and it was so sad the way that it went down, that I actually, when I went back to work, I lied to my employers, because they asked how my baby was, and I said fine. And it wasn't until later on that I could come to grips with saying that, we lost our baby. And it was so, like, I mean, oh my gosh, I was 21 years old. I was a kid myself, right? And I'm
Mhm.
trying to deal with this loss and trying to, understand why it happened, pretend that it didn't happen, the stages of grief that most people go through. So, to have somebody like you to help facilitate the situation would be priceless. So, is that kind of, do you feel like you act as a facilitator in these situations, Kevin?
No.
Okay.
What I specifically do is train the management on how to have these conversations
Gotcha. Okay.
because I can't be there for all of them.
Sure. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But yeah, going back to your point, like in life, we're taught how to acquire things,
Mhm.
not what to do when we lose them.
Right.
There are very few people who have these skills. And like it's because it's what we're taught growing up. I was raised in an environment growing up where we never spoke about grief. We just pushed it all down. We never had any kind of sad or uncomfortable conversation. It just
Right.
pretended like it wasn't there,
Right.
which, that's just avoiding grief.
And but there is a time for that, right? Would you say there is, or is that really never really a
Well,
good spot to
it's
be?
dependent on the person,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
I'm not gonna say it's good or bad,
Yeah.
but like avoiding it for 20 years is be bad.
Yeah. Well, I'm a black and
Right.
white guy, so I'm like, hey, it's either good or bad. Which box is it in, Kevin? You
Mhm.
tell me, right? So
Yeah.
that's what I have to work on, is really understanding that, I need to be empathetic for people that are going through that. And if I'm a leader, I
Mhm.
have to say that if I had to be involved in something that happened to one of my people on my team, I would not know where to start. So once we're sorry for what they're going through, once they're, you're exercising patience, what other things, would you be able to share with me as a leader that, could help me cope
Sure.
with this and work through it?
Have you ever heard that expression, time heals all wounds?
Hmm.
That's one of those myths about grief that we're told our entire lives.
Right. Okay.
Like it's the same thing. I have this analogy of if you break your leg, right, and you don't go to a doctor, and that leg heals crooked. Well, it might not hurt anymore after a year, but it's still there. It's
Sure.
still it's still going to be affecting you.
Right.
And when you finally get around to dealing with that, um, what the doctor's going to have to do is re-break that leg and set it right.
Ouch. Yeah.
Right. And that's very painful.
Yeah.
But like, one thing I want to say about grief is that there's no timeline on grief.
Okay.
Like, and there's probably not a point in your life where you're going to look back on that time when you were 21 and not wonder, not be sad about that moment.
Right. Absolutely.
And that's okay.
Right.
like overcoming grief is not overcoming the sadness of them not being here. It's
Sure.
setting aside that pain that we're carrying with us, that pain that inhibits us from working full time and
Yeah.
engaging in life.
So I have a question that brings up. I feel like, how do you get unstuck? Because I think, to your point, there is no timeline. So I totally get that people process grief and they work through it in their own time frame. I also think that there are people, and I don't know specifics, so I can't say, hey, I got this, I know this situation. But I know for me, in my situation, I was stuck for quite a number of years, blaming myself, wondering what I could have done different, thinking, feeling guilt. I mean, it was just a lot of that negative stuff that surrounded this trauma that I had. And it wasn't until I actually got involved with a counselor and they helped me through, some of these things. I'm just trying to understand from a team perspective at work, if I see somebody, and again, I don't want to put a time frame on it, after a certain period of time, you're not seeing progress, or you're not seeing improvement. And again, maybe it's internally going on, so I don't want to be just looking at the outside. But I'm just curious, do I as a leader ever help somebody get unstuck, or am I just patient as long as need be until this person recovers, whatever that looks like?
That's a good question, and there's a lot of things to that. Well, one thing that we have to know is that there's no time on grief, but like you can expect something traumatic to affect them for 6 months or more.
Okay.
No, like if it's still, the definition of complicated grief is if 6 months from that date when it happened, if we're still thinking about it every day and it's still affecting our lives. So 6 months is a long time.
Sure. Okay. So they
And
call that complicated grief, Kevin?
mhm, yeah,
Okay, I didn't know that. So that's really probably a really good indicator for us as a leader to be able to kind of take a watch. Or no,
mhm.
are you tell me, fill me in. That's so let me
Well,
just finish, because what I heard
yeah.
and how I would interpret that, and I want to get your feedback, right or wrong, is, again, 6 months arbitrary number, but in 6 months, if you're not seeing any type of progress, or if they're still stuck wherever,
Mhm.
that's considered complicated grief. Do you approach it differently then?
Not really.
Okay.
Like as a manager, one thing of what you're going to do is what I recommend is weekly check-ins with them.
Okay.
Just spend time, just you and them, because odds are they're not going to open up to you the first time, especially if you don't have that kind of relationship with them.
Sure.
So like you're doing this every week, and remember, for 6 months, that's what, 24 meetings,
Sure.
one week. And every single time you're going to be documenting their progress. How are they
Okay.
doing? Like you are as a leader, and so you could see if they're actually like improving work wise. We can't do anything to influence how somebody behaves when they're not at work.
Okay. Right.
Like we can't do anything to physically make someone move through grief.
Right.
But moving through grief and not getting stuck is just taking very small steps every day, like journaling or exercising or you know talking with friends.
So are you then encouraging those, if I'm a leader and I'm kind of walking through this with one of the people on my team,
Mhm.
I'm assuming then I'm asking questions, right? I'm checking in. How are you? Have you, are you asking about their appetite or their food? And are you asking them about exercise? Are you getting into that minutia with people, or are you just kind of,
Like Dave, how have you been? How have you been? Have you been taking care of yourself?
and
I
I'm going to
noticed
say
you were
good.
20 minutes late. I noticed you were 20 minutes late the other day, and you've been like repeatedly getting late. Is it hard getting up in the mornings and
Okay.
getting motivated?
Okay. So you can get into some specifics with
Mhm.
people okay.
Mhm.
Because I know that, and I know again from personal experience, when people asked me questions, I totally deflected.
Mhm.
I built a wall around me. I had to self-preserve myself. I was in the
Mhm.
self-preservation, mode, right? And so I
Yeah.
felt when people came at me, it was like an attempt to fix me. You know, I
Mhm.
didn't feel, and maybe it was because I didn't have that around me, or maybe I did and I just didn't identify. I didn't identify with somebody that really purely just cared about me, and they would sit next to me for an hour and not say a word if that's what it took, right?
Mhm.
That's got to be like really missing in today's workforce, I would think.
Oh, it is. Yeah.
I mean,
One thing I love to recommend is a point of contact.
okay,
So you like when, especially when they're out on bereavement leave, you have one person in the company who's in charge of calling them or their family, right?
okay,
And arranging everything. So you don't have a manager calling and the HR and a leader and a team lead or anything like that. It's just one person.
okay,
And that same person can like also be like their buddy when they go into work. I call
sure,
it a buddy system.
okay,
Because with any large organization, odds are you're going to have people going through or who have gone through similar losses.
sure,
And if we have that kind of culture where I can like walk up to you, Dave, if I'm having a terrible day and just, take 15 minutes and we can go walk around the building and just talk. That's peer-led counseling. That's counseling that's in-house that you don't pay for. That's, culture building, friendship building, like within your organization.
wow. And that's really, so I'm writing down pure lead counseling, because that's, I mean, we trust our peers, we trust the people that are around us, but yet we can breach that trust not knowing how to react to these circumstances. Like you said, Kevin, we're not designed to, we didn't have the manual that shows the 4-step process to helping your neighbor through grief.
Mhm.
And the weird thing is, in my opinion, I want to get your opinion. Like you said before, each person kind of works through it different. So if I have two people going through something at two different times or same time, whatever, person A, I'm going to have to deal with differently than person B. Correct?
Mhm.
Most likely, right? How do I differentiate? How do I get to understand? Are there some tools or tricks or tips, not tricks, but tips that you can help us with to understand how to effectively deal with a person's grief?
Yeah, well, we're not dealing with their grief. Like the only thing we're doing is witnessing,
Okay.
right? We don't have to know what to say.
Okay.
In fact, sometimes like there is nothing to say. Like
Right.
there's like nothing really to say for like your loss either to try to make you feel better. There's
Right.
no making you feel better. And it's sometimes just being that silent presence,
Right. Okay.
acknowledging the grief. I see your suffering. I see your pain. It sucks. And I'm here.
Yeah. Okay. So you're leaving it open ended to allow the person going through the grief to kind of react or respond, or, according to what they feel they need.
Right.
Because I know for me, what I didn't want were the people, and I had people in my life at the time that came at me with solutions, and they came
Mhm.
at me with stuff, right? And there were,
Yeah.
and it was just like, oh my gosh, right? Get away.
Yeah.
There was no empathy. There was no real understanding what I'm going through. And it's hard for somebody to say, I understand what you're going through, because I think that's as bad as it time heals all wounds, right? You don't know what I'm going through
Yeah.
unless you've gone through it, which again, then, more power to you. You've gone through it. But I remember people saying, I understand what you're going through. And boy, it felt cold and, you know, plastic, because I looked at their life. They had no clue,
Yep.
right? So that's where I think I appreciate that from your perspective, but I'd like to know, is that accurate, that we really shouldn't say stuff like that to
You
people?
know, I have an entire, I was chuckling while you were saying that. I have an entire module about them.
Okay.
Things to, what not to say.
Well,
There's a
give us a
whole bunch of
couple.
things that like very well-meaning people say
Sure. Yeah.
that just are awful.
Yeah. Well, so can you give us a couple, Kevin, out of that module? I mean, you
Yeah.
said, what are a couple that we haven't talked about?
Well, like, a big one is, don't should on your friends.
Yep.
You should do this. I tried yoga back when I had this loss. You should go do that.
There you go.
We're not there to offer suggestions. We're just there to listen.
Right.
There was uh, replacing the loss, saying things like, well, don't feel bad. It was only a pet. You can
Oh,
go out and
right.
get another one. Or Dave, and I've heard this before. Well, don't feel bad. At least you can still try again to have more children.
Right. Right. Oh
And
God.
now it's a very dismissive,
Right.
very like callous thing to say.
Right. And I want to circle back to the one about listening, because we do a ton of listening skills training. And I think if you're listening here now and you're, identifying with anything that Kevin or I am saying, I think that this is a great opportunity for you as a business owner, entrepreneur, whatever, to really work on your listening skills. Because it's one thing to hear biologically, like you can hear biologically my voice right now, but if you're working out or driving or walking or whatever, reading a book, whatever, you're only hearing, you're really not listening. And I think this is really an important spot for you to grow as a leader, because you can transition from hearing to listening, especially when somebody else is really struggling. And I know that a lot of people have a hard time listening, because about halfway through the person talking, I know I struggle with this. I'm formulating my next thought in my head, right? And I'm no longer listening. I'm just waiting for silence so that I can jump in. And I think this is where I love the fact that we can't fix this. We're not here to fix it. And I appreciate that we're here to witness it. We're witnessing it. That's a really freeing way to look at it. I'm not here to fix anything. I'm not here to solve anything. I'm not here to make it any better. I'm here to help any way I can to get you through it. Is that kind of the thought
Exactly.
process that we want to be as a leader?
Exactly.
Awesome.
I
Cool.
tell people not to be afraid of that awkward silence either.
Oh, that's awkwardness, and is that awkward silence is hard, right?
It's the hardest thing in the world to sit face to face with somebody and not say a word for 30 seconds.
Right.
It would,
Absolutely.
it would kill us to do it right now, but this is a podcast. Like nobody wants to.
Yeah, we'd lose all our listeners, right? Well, and it's so funny, but oddly enough, and I talk about that in listening skills too, because we can drive. I know I can drive with my wife on a 4-hour drive up to our favorite place up north in Door County in Wisconsin, and we can like not talk. And it's not that we're mad at each other. It's not that we don't like each other. It's just that silence for two people that are intimately they know each other intimately, that's not a problem. But again, for you and I to drive across town for 20 minutes and have silence, it'd be like, oh my gosh, right? You're like trying to find things to talk about.
Yeah.
So I think practicing silence is a huge thing for this, because people just want you sitting next to them at times.
Mhm. It's a great way to make them feel they've been heard too.
Yep.
Is it like with that little bit of silence, especially trying to get out something so emotional, it takes you time to get those words out,
Right.
to
Yep.
get going. Because
Yep.
it's awkward sharing something like that, especially to a boss.
Right. Especially if there's shame involved or you feel like you could have done something better. And that's what I struggled
Mhm.
with. I thought I did something wrong. I thought I could have done something better. And so, you're fighting that in addition to the loss. So, it's
Mhm.
one thing when your dog gets hit by a car, so to speak, and you didn't have anything to do with it. It's completely different if you feel like you had something to do with it. So,
Mhm.
that's got to be really, really a challenge,
Mhm.
in a hard time. And so, I thank you for sharing that stuff. I mean, I totally think that there's this module would be really freeing to learn things, because I'm thinking I have blind spots that I don't even know I'm doing this.
Mhm.
I can remember, people saying, he's in a much better place. And, it's stuff that is probably one of those you don't want to say to people,
Yep.
right?
It's on the
You know,
list.
and it's like, oh my gosh. I appreciate the intention. I appreciate the heart that it's coming from. Unfortunately, it doesn't really, it didn't help me. It didn't
Mhm.
help, with that type of thing. So are there some things we could kind of replace the things that are best not said? Are there some things that we could say to kind of help the
Oh, yeah.
situation?
Well, like we've already talked about some of them, and it's just, asking that question of how they're doing and just shutting up.
Yep, that's so
Give it
true.
10 or 15 seconds.
Right.
Yeah, like everyone, no one's really comfortable with awkward pauses, and like if you start it, they're going to feel that pause with something, and just give them that chance.
Yeah, that's really great. Man, this is like my listening skills training all all over, Kevin.
Yeah. One of those things
Yeah.
that I tell people not to say is, "Let me know if I can do anything,"
Okay.
because that's so vague.
Yeah.
Let me know if there's anything I can do.
Yeah.
Well, like, I want them back in my life. Can you do that?
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Or call me if you need anything. Well, like if I'm up at 3:30 in the morning, can I call you?
Yeah.
So I tell people to be more specific.
Okay.
Like, this Friday night, I'll come over with a pizza and we'll just stay in and watch Netflix.
Sure.
Or, I'm usually up until midnight. If you're ever wanting to call, I'll take your call.
That's awesome.
Like, get specific with it and something that you can actually do.
Yeah. That's
Because if they call and you don't answer, that's going to create just disappointment and tension
right.
that no one needs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you say something like, "How are you doing?" Like you said, we don't wait for the answer. And I talk about this, whether it's in sales training, whether it's in leadership development, whether it's in listening skills in general. When somebody asks an open-ended question, the research shows that it takes about 8 seconds, 7 or 8 seconds of silence for them to formulate an answer. I mean, how are you doing? Most people say, fine, right? I mean, it's like an instant word, right? And so when we ask a question that requires thought, it takes, some time for us to think. Well, I found this research that unfortunately points that after about 2 seconds, if I ask you and I say, Kevin, how you doing? And I'm supposed to wait 8 seconds for a response. The vast majority of people don't do that. So what they do is after a couple seconds, they ask the question again. And this time I'm going to multiple choice it to make it easier for you. So I say, Kevin, how you doing? 2 seconds of silence. Kevin, how you doing? Are you feeling this? Are you feeling that? I fill those blanks in for people. And then that just limits them and it really boxes them into, wow, I have to pick A, B, C, or D.
Yeah.
Don't feel those, now what, right? So are you seeing, when you get into that minutia from a leadership perspective, are there any pieces of advice that you have for people?
We'll just leave it open-ended.
Awesome.
And it's okay too if you don't have that relationship with them, or if they don't feel comfortable talking about it. As long as they have someone in the organization to talk to, it's okay. It doesn't have to be you. And in some cases, that's maybe not appropriate.
So and that's a good question. And that's a follow-up for me, is if I am a leader of a team and somebody on my team is going through grief or having, had some trauma or loss, does it always have to be me? Or is there somebody, I do a lot of work with DISC, which is a personality profiling. So I know that there's different personalities. Some are more people, and some are more fact people. So,
Yeah.
if I'm an engineer and I struggle with emotion, not that I'm an emotionless person, it's just that I don't lead with my emotions the way a people person does. So if I'm more on the engineering side and I struggle with making that connection with my team, would I be okay to kind of transfer that responsibility, so to speak, to someone else that might be better equipped?
Well, to a certain degree, but you're still going to be there for them.
Okay.
If you're the team lead or their manager, you still interact with them. You still have to know how they're doing, if they can handle the assignment. And we can do that compassionately.
Sure. Okay.
Like we don't have to like emotionally engage with them to be able to understand that they're suffering.
Hmm. Okay. Because I always think that the engineer, and again, the engineering uh, personality is so fact based and
Mhm.
can be very matter of fact that, and again, it's not that they don't have a heart, and it's not that they
No,
which
those
one in the
emotions
Wizard of Oz didn't have a heart? I can't remember. Was it the Tin Man?
and
Tin Man, right? It's not that you don't have a heart, it's that you lead and you decide, and your life is more about fact and than it is about people. Nothing wrong with that. There's no right or wrong. I'm just curious if that person's listening and they are like, I don't feel comfortable doing this. Do we encourage them to jump out of their comfort zone, or do we then just kind of encourage the whole team, to act as a helper to this individual?
I'm all about encouraging them to jump out of their comfort zone.
Gotcha.
Like
Cool.
this is something that can be taught. It's not physically hard to do,
Okay.
and it's one of those life skills that will help you in every area of your life.
Gotcha. Okay.
Being able to listen and engage emotionally with someone.
So you have, to kind of transition a little bit, you have this Grieving at Work online video course.
Mhm.
So kind of explain, what are the modules? What does that look like?
Oh,
I
sure,
mean,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
tell
so
me about that.
it's two different courses. There's Grief 101, which that's designed for every single manager, really every employee. And it tells you, this is what grief is. Everyone grieves differently. Here are some facts about grief. Here are things that you should say, things that you absolutely should not say. Here are some myths about grief. Here are how people in different cultures and different backgrounds grieve.
Okay.
And all that goes into it, and it's just a intro course to just the basics of grief and human interaction.
Okay.
The advanced grief management is all about how, we talked about earlier, how to track their performance. What do you do if you recognize warning signs like depression, alcoholism, suicidal thoughts, those kind of things? How do you intervene there?
Sure.
How do you fire a grieving employee?
Wow. Oh
You,
gosh.
I mean, you have to at some point. I mean, there are bad employees before they have any tragedy,
Sure.
and the tragedy is not going to change the fact that they were still on the way. And you don't want to be the bad guy,
Right.
but there were compassionate ways to do that.
Sure. Hmm. So I wrote down HR with a question mark because I'm
Mhm.
thinking about if there's a medium to large size company involved in this and they're listening and they're like, yeah, you don't understand our HR department, that we leave that up to them. I mean, there's got to be laws and HIPAA laws and oh my gosh, all this EEOC and all these things. How do you maneuver and kind of work your way through that and keep, I want to keep it legal,
Mhm.
but I
Yeah.
also want to keep it real. So,
Mhm.
do you talk about that in either one of your
Oh,
courses
yeah.
much?
Well, I don't talk about it in the courses, but when I'm onboarding a company,
Okay.
I look at their entire grief practice.
Okay.
What's their grief risk?
Okay.
What's their employee handbook say about grief? Do they
Gotcha.
get bereavement leave? Can they use other things for bereavement leave if they need,
Okay.
like the Family Medical Leave Act or anything?
Yep. Now, does
Do
the
you provide
FMLA
grief
have,
leave?
does the FMLA talk about grief?
Not real. They talk about bereavement a little bit, but
Okay.
not grief.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. So as we start to land this plane today, I have a question that just popped into my brain, and I think it's going to be helpful for me. If I wanted to take this grieving at work course, am I better off waiting until I'm in the midst of grief, or is this one of those things that I would benefit from learning as a tool that hopefully I'll never use, but chances are I will use,
Oh,
or does it
absolutely.
work
Use
in
it
both
now.
places?
Like right now.
Okay.
Like right now, we are in a very special time. Everyone is grieving something, and like this isn't like we grieve more than just death, like divorce, for instance,
Okay.
job loss, moving, financials, political grief,
Sure.
right? Like all like and not even counting all this pandemic stuff that we've been worrying with.
Sure. So then your thought process is this grieving at work course is helpful for us because it is, I mean, like you said, whether it's divorce or financial, whatever it is, any opportunity in your life where there's a loss, this is going to help me specifically, but help the listeners and the
Yeah.
viewers really better understand what they're going through or
Mhm.
about to go through, or help
Yeah.
somebody else go through.
Yeah. Exactly.
Gotcha.
Just learn about it because the why grief is so awkward is because it's we never see it. When we cry, like we're supposed to go to another room, right? Let's think
Yeah.
about how ridiculous it would be if every time you laughed, you had to get up and go to another room because
That's
you didn't want to
funny.
make everyone in the room happy, right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Like grief and like sadness is so awkward because we're
Yeah.
so unused to it.
Yeah.
So
I
let's
remember.
get used to it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And now this just brings back memories of when I was a kid. My parents would say, stop crying,
Mhm.
and it's like, holy
Yeah.
cow, I don't know, maybe who knows what I was, they were making me eat my peas, or who knows what the grief and
Yeah.
trauma at the moment was, right? I'm sure it
Mhm.
was catastrophic. And, my parents were super mean to me. I'm sure in my mind, I knew, I was convinced, but, you
Yeah.
know, I mean, for me at that point, Kevin, it was really legitimate. And I'm not saying that,
It
you cry
always is.
every day and you'll get your way. Boy, there's some different ways to handle it though, as
Mhm.
as a parent as well. So
Yeah.
does this kind of get into the parenting thing as well, the grieving part?
Well, it does certainly for learning how to talk about it, and
Okay.
like because it, as parents, well, like we learn how to grieve by watching our parents grieve.
Okay.
So if we as parents, if we never show emotion in front of our children, well, they're never going to show emotion like
Holy
that.
cow. Wow, that's really smart. Yeah, I never even thought of that. I mean, that's interesting. My dad and my mom handle it two different ways. So
Mhm.
when I'm forced to, my dad kind of brushes it under the rug, and my mom as a therapist, retired therapist now, she addresses it head on.
Mhm.
Well, I kind of like it under the cover. I kind of like it under the rug, because it's
Yeah.
kind of like it's this big lump in the middle of the living room that no one ever talks about, but they trip over all the time, right?
Mhm.
But that's just safer, at least for me initially, than just so tell me about your feelings, or let's attack this head on. So grief can be such a big topic, and so I greatly appreciate that you unpack this for us, Kevin. If you had a tip of the week for people listening, and maybe it was something we talked about, maybe it was something we didn't, but
Mhm.
I like to have a tip of the week. So what's Kevin Ringstaff's tip of the week?
I would say to be present when someone's trying to share something that they're going through. Just listen to them without thinking about what we're going to say at next. We just listen to them and like fully right there with them.
Isn't it?
Just
Why is that so hard?
because like we're a distracted society.
Okay.
My phone's gone off like 4 times while we've been talking, right?
Oh no, I'm
And
sorry.
all these, like all these little things in our life just keep distracting us. Like what we're doing tomorrow, what's on TV tonight, what am I eating for dinner?
Sure.
Like, oh, there's Ponce over there, my cat in the background, just
That
rolling
dude's
around in his
awesome. He
bed.
hasn't moved. He hasn't moved. He's awesome.
It's the hardest thing in the world to stay focused on what's right in front of you.
Gotcha. And what a great message for entrepreneurs, business owners, anybody that's listening, is to be present right there. I mean, that just shows the person that you're communicating with, that you're sitting with, whatever, that you right now, nothing else in the world matters
Yeah.
except you and what you're going through and what you're telling me or not telling me. That's so helpful. Thank you for
You
sharing
can
that.
do that at any skill level.
Right. Yeah.
You can know anything else.
Yeah. But it does, I gotta say, and I'm not very good at this, and I know that, and I'm working on it. It does take practice.
Mhm.
It takes practice. I have to literally envision a blank sheet of paper without any handwritten, any writing on it, nothing on it. And that's how I'm able to kind of clear my mind so that I can focus right exactly on the person, that's in front of me. And my brain, can process way more than is going on right there. So I have to like hone my brain in to just be like, wow, focus on Kevin, or Kevin's issue or whatever he's saying, the words coming out of his mouth. So
Mhm.
being present, if you're listening and you struggle with it, you know what, join the club, because
Yeah.
it's really a tough thing to
You know,
do.
I know a fun trick with that is to always be able to repeat the last 6 words they said.
The last 6 words they said, the last 6 words they said, there it is.
Mhm.
Wow. Yeah, and that's a cool listening skills
Your
tip.
mind's not going to go anywhere else.
Right? If you can always repeat back what someone else said, they know you're listening. I mean, that's I think such a respectful thing. It just adds really a trust really quick when you're able to do that with people because they know that you're listening. I think that's fantastic.
Mhm.
So awesome. So hey, as we land this plane, Kevin, I always ask people, what's one thing that most people don't know about you that you feel comfortable sharing?
Hmm. I have a rose-haired tarantula that I got for a Halloween party some years ago. She is 7 years old now.
Gosh. And rose haired meaning rose colored?
Well, sort of.
Or is that just the name of it?
That's the name of it. Some of them are actually rose-haired.
Okay.
She's not really.
So how does Ponce work with how does the cat work with the tarantula?
Absolutely ignores him. Ponce ignores her, yeah.
Oh my
But
God.
the crickets that I feed the tarantula, he is all over them.
Okay. Oh my gosh. That is so cool. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for unpacking this. I know that it's obviously an uncomfortable and awkward situation. Like we said, I told you at the beginning it would be. Thank you for making it such an easy discussion here. If people want to learn more about you, if they want to learn more about your online video course, Grieving at Work, or they potentially want to talk to you about this subject more, what's the best way for people to get a hold of you?
You can email me, kevin@grievingatwork.com,
Okay.
or just go to grievingatwork.com, or search Kevin Ringstaff. I'm all over the place.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, again, thank you for taking an awkward subject and walking us through it in a kind and gentle way. And I hope if you're listening and you are in this spot, please don't feel like you have to go through this alone. You know, there's people like Kevin that are here to help. And, you know, I mean, I know if I was going through something, I would feel totally comfortable in, you know, jumping on a call with Kevin and asking for his help. And so our goal here is for you to be able to, every week we bring people that can help in different ways. And I thought that this was as awkward and as scary as it was for me. I just wanted you to know that there are people out there that can help you with this. And so thank you, Kevin, again, so much for opening yourself up to this. And any last words?
Well, it was my absolute pleasure. Yeah, thank you so much, Dave.
Absolutely. Cool. Well, enjoy. And again, calm that cat down for our next interview because the cat's just like going crazy. For those of you that can't see him, he hasn't moved an inch in the whole 50 minutes that we've been hanging out. So Ponce, man, just, you know, take it down a notch, will you, buddy? So thank you, Kevin. And hopefully people listening will reach out if they feel the need and look forward to hearing great things that you can help them with.
Yeah, thank you so much.